later on he discovers that this woman has actually escaped from an asylum. Who is the real monster in this story? It's kind of like pre-sci-fi, I'd like to say. She discovers that this dark and mysterious past of the deceased wife is still sort of haunting the family and the house. It is one of the weirdest books I've read recently. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. It has been so long since I've done a proper sit down video like this, and a large part of that is to do with the fact that I've moved to London, as you guys will all know from my vlogs, and it's actually been really difficult trying to find the time to sit down and film something with the whole new job, being in London, having lots to do on my weekends, meeting new colleagues, making new friends and things. But finally I found a little bit of spare time to sit down and do a video that I am quite excited about. As you guys will know, my favourite season is autumn, and autumn is upon us. The leaves are turning orange, it smells smoky, and you've got your pumpkin spice lattes coming out, and it's jumper weather, and I am just so excited. So I really wanted to sit down and do a video about my, I don't know, top sort of autumn Halloween reading recommendations. These are all just based on what I've read and sort of autumnal vibe books, spooky books. I obviously don't have all of my books with me, so I can't sort of sit down and hold them up and show you. I've got two of them with me that I've put next to me on the bed. I'll just sort of talk you through them. Before I get started, I'd just like to say I think I'm going to do this in some sort of vague chronological order, not completely, but I've tried to do it by time period. So if you are more interested in maybe like Victorian type stuff, you'll enjoy the beginning of this video, but if you're more into more modern stuff, then you might want to skip to the end. But I do recommend sticking with me all the way through to hear my wide range of sort of classics to start off with, and then maybe becoming a little bit more niche or interesting books that I've read over the years, and more recently as well, some really recent publications coming at the end of this video. So with that said, let's get started. So my first reading recommendation on the list is actually one of, if not my absolute favourite books of all time, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I studied this for my A-levels, and this is what really got me into reading, made me fall in love with reading, and yeah, I love the Bronte sisters in general. I actually do have a copy of that here with me because I went to a charity store. I love book shopping in charity stores. I love seeing what you can find and things. And I came across this beautiful penguin cloth-bound classic version of the book, and because it is my favourite, I decided to invest in it. It was literally £4. £4. I think these are normally about £12 if you buy them in Waterstones. But how pretty is this copy? If you guys can see that, I'm not sure if it's going to focus on the book. There. So Jane Eyre follows our protagonist, Jane Eyre, from childhood into adulthood. It's what's known as a Bildungsroman, which is a coming-of-age novel. So we follow little Jane as an orphan, treated quite cruelly by her wicked aunt, until she sort of grows up and goes to school, and then after that middle school stage of her life, we then follow her into her young adulthood as a governess at a manor house where she teaches a young girl called Adele, and there she's employed by a Mr. Rochester, who has his own dark secrets hidden up in his attic. So if you are looking for a somewhat spooky read this autumn, this is really great. It's not horror, definitely not, but it is what is known as the gothic genre, or it falls into the gothic genre. So it does have some sort of supernatural elements. It's very sort of moody and dark, and there is this slight supernatural vibe that plays throughout it, even though it's not a supernatural sort of novel. It's my personal favourite. I love that it's set against the backdrop of the Yorkshire moors, and it just feels cold and autumnal and wintry, and it's a really good book to grab a cup of tea and cozy up with, I think. So the next book on my list is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So that is actually Charlotte Bronte's sister. There were 3 Bronte sisters. I feel really bad for Anne for not including some of her books in this, but Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights are the most famous books of the Bronte sisters. I'm sure you will all have heard of Wuthering Heights, and some of you will probably have read it. But this is also a really, really great book. In my opinion, I prefer Jane Eyre, but Wuthering Heights is still sort of up there, but I personally prefer Jane Eyre. Like Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights is also set on the Yorkshire moors. It's that cold, stormy, moody sort of scenery that we all love in autumn, and it follows the protagonist, Heathcliff. I'm sure that name rings a bell. Who is orphaned as a child. There seems to be a recurring theme here. And he's taken in by this man who introduces him to his existing family and raises him as his own son. There is a lot of animosity there in the household, with the brother, the original brother, not taking to Heathcliff. And again, it sort of follows his life. It's a tale of vengeance for the way he was mistreated growing up, when this brother takes over the estate after the father has passed away. It's also a tale of sort of tormented, obsessive love. It has that creepy, spooky element, again, not specifically horror or supernatural. It's just sort of slightly eerie and, yeah, vengeful and suspenseful. Next up, staying in a similar sort of time period, I'd recommend The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. Now, I also love this book. It is definitely up there, maybe like my top 10 all-time favourite books. And it's a very similar sort of theme of that gothic genre again, where we have sort of rainy, spooky, stormy scenery. We have a supernatural element in there. So it follows a young artist called Walter Hartwright, who one day sees a mysterious woman in white, this sort of silhouette of a figure in the distance in London, and she's a bit frantic, a bit panicked, asking for help, assistance to get away. Later on, he discovers that this woman has actually escaped from an asylum. And the story sort of follows this young man as he tries to uncover the identity of this woman, her backstory, why she was so panicked, who she really is. I think the novel definitely throws up questions of identity and female autonomy, or switched identities and things like that, through this slightly spooky, eerie, suspenseful lens. I definitely think all of these books sound really, really similar. Maybe you should go away and read the blurb, because they are all quite different. They just all fall into a similar sort of category of this Victorian Gothic novel that was so popular at the time, which is personally my favourite sort of genre and my favourite sort of book to read, which is why they are the first 3 books on my list. Book number 4 is a book that everyone will all know, and that's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And we all know this tale. It's as old as time. There's this young, crazed scientist who is sort of excited to animate lifeless matter, and he wants to push, I don't know, the boundaries of science, and he creates his monster, Frankenstein's monster. And upon creating his monster, he is repulsed by its ugliness. He detests the monster he's created. Like his scientific experiment has gone wrong. And in response to this repulsion, Frankenstein's monster sort of takes off, flees, and is intent on causing destruction and harm and horror. And I think this novel definitely throws up questions of ethics, of responsibility. It cautions against the dangers of science, and it definitely leaves us wondering at the end of the novel who is the real monster in this story. Book number 5 is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And again, this is another one that is falling into that same sort of category, but they're just so brilliant for like the autumn, winter time of the year. And this is about a man who is young and beautiful, and he gets a portrait painted of him, and he sort of resents it that it's going to outlive his own beauty. It's captured his youthfulness in a specific moment of time, and while that picture will stay young forever, he will age and become ugly and disgusting, kind of like Frankenstein's monster, really. And he decides to trade his soul for youth and beauty, or eternal youth and beauty, and he asks that the painting age instead. And it is just a brilliant story about decadence and hedonism and degeneration and the fleeting nature of youth and beauty. And I can definitely recommend this book in the autumn winter season, because it does have that slightly spooky feel to it that might help you get in the mood for Halloween. Book number 6 is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is another tale of, or perhaps caution against, the dangers of science, just like that Frankenstein novel. Again, Dr. Jekyll is a well-respected, very intelligent scientist, but he has this sort of evil alter ego lurking beneath, and it's about how he unlocks that and gives it a persona and brings it into being and into life. And again, it's just about the inner evil perhaps that we're all hiding, and well, in this novel specifically, how science has enabled that to come to life. Number 7, you guys might not have heard so much of before. It's still a classic, but I've definitely not heard people talking about it as much as your Dr. Jekylls or your Frankensteins or your Wuthering Heights, and that's At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. Personally, I didn't enjoy this book so much as I did the previous novels I've talked about, but I definitely think it's really good for this time of year, for spooky season, for Halloween, if you're into that sort of, it's kind of like pre-sci-fi, I'd like to say, sort of, it's a tale of a lost civilization, a strange and alien people, and the book begins with a team of scientists heading on an Antarctic expedition, and it's about the dark and strange secrets they uncover about a people that used to roam this earth. I did feel that it got weighed down a little bit too heavily with scientific terminology and long paragraphs of scientific jargon, but if you like that, you might find this really interesting read. I still found the story was good, but I think sometimes that scientific language just distracted me too much, or detracted from the plot line, or it was just a bit too dense. That said, it still made it onto this list because I think it is perfect for the season. Number 8 is a classic that we all love, and that is The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. I actually haven't read a lot of Sherlock stuff, but this was given to me by a friend before I got to university, and we both ended up studying English at the same college at Cambridge, so what a strange coincidence that is. But he gave me this book as a birthday present and I loved it, so I'm recommending it to you guys. So the novel starts with the death of Sir Charles Baskerville. Sorry, I'm following notes on my phone because I wanted to make sure this was thorough and I didn't fluff the plot lines or the names of characters, because they are all quite long-winded and waffly and they've all got really long names, so yeah, following my phone if you see me looking to the side. But it starts with the death of Sir Charles Baskerville, and we begin by questioning, was this caused by a ghostly hound that has haunted the family for years? Now, I know this sounds ridiculous, but it is actually a brilliant story. And as ever, Sherlock Holmes is on the case to sort of unwind this supernatural mystery that is haunting the Baskerville family, and it sort of considers themes of good versus evil and supernatural, and you've got that lovely like detective thread running through it. So for any of you who love a good detective novel, try and work it out before you get to the end. Number 9 is a book that is quite similar to Jane Eyre. It often gets compared to Jane Eyre, and when I studied Jane Eyre at school for my coursework, a lot of people actually use this novel as a comparison novel. So that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is recently, I say recently, maybe in the last year or more, being turned into a Netflix film. Not series, yes, film. So go and watch that if you haven't seen it already, but read the book first. And Rebecca is again about a young woman, a governess, similar to our Jane character. Is she a governess or is she a maid? Ah, she's a lady's maid. I was wrong. That is how it starts. So we're in Monte Carlo. She's with her sort of mistress, master, lady of the house, and she comes across this dark and brooding and handsome man, Maxime de Winter, who has recently been widowed. His wife has passed away under mysterious circumstances, but he falls madly in love with our young lady's maid in Monte Carlo and decides to bring her home and marry her, which sounds lovely, right? But it all sort of changes when they get back to the beautiful mansion in England, and she discovers that this dark and mysterious past of the deceased wife is still sort of haunting the family and the house and all of the village, really. The circumstances of her death are mysterious and they unfold throughout the novel. We follow this lady's maid as she gets jealous and constantly compared to this deceased woman, but all is not as it seems. So if you want to find out how she's died and what this strange story is, then I think you should definitely go away and read Rebecca. Number 10, you guys definitely probably all have heard of. It's quite a niche book, and this was actually the book I used when I was writing my Jane Eyre coursework. It all comes back to Jane Eyre. Gotta love her, love Jane Eyre. And this book is called Year of Wonders by Geraldine. It is a witchcrafty sort of plague era book, and I think it is just brilliant. Definitely not as well known. It did win a lot of prizes, but it's not like one of your classics yet because it is such a modern book. So I would definitely recommend going away and reading it if you are into this like witchy sort of genre, which is actually taking off again. Stay tuned to the end of my video when I'll be talking about another witch style book. Another few actually, it's really popular at the minute. This book starts when the plague hits a small village in Derbyshire and lots of people are starting to die. They're looking for ways to treat the plague and how to find hope in such a dark and miserable time. The villagers turn to herbs and herbal remedies, witchcraft and all sorts of different things they can try to treat the plague as it's sort of spreading through their village and taking the lives of all of the people in their community. And the story is told by our narrator Anna Frith, who is a young 18-year-old woman who's trying to navigate this difficult landscape of her whole village around her, battling the plague. She has to contend with the death of her family as well. And I don't want to give too much away, so I'll end it there. But if you are interested, then definitely go and read this to get you in the mood for Halloween. Number 11 isn't supernatural as such. It's not really a horror, maybe a psychological horror, but it's definitely very, very different to all of the other books I've discussed so far. And this is a more modern book. You will have all probably seen the cover on the shelves of Waterstones and W.H. Smith and Blackwell's and every notable bookstore a couple of years ago. And that's The Last by Hannah Jameson. So this is like a weird dystopian World War III type fiction, if I remember correctly. I think it starts with a nuclear bomb going off, and we're following a young academic American professor who is at a conference in a Swiss hotel, I think, and him and the rest of the guests discover via the news that this nuclear bomb has gone off, and or multiple nuclear bombs have gone off across the world, and they're not sure what's left of America and other countries and big major cities. They don't know if they're the last remaining people on the earth. And it's kind of a story of, again, ethics, survival, morality, what people do to survive. But laced through this entire plot is another major plot, and that is the murder of a young girl in the hotel whose body is discovered in a water tank. So whilst we're contending with the end of the world, we also have to deal with this horrible, gruesome murder of a young girl, and the academic American professor is trying to work out who has killed this girl, who her parents are, what her story is, and we follow him as he sort of becomes paranoid and obsessed with this story as all of the other hotel guests become paranoid and suspicious. And it's just a very, very suspenseful novel that I can definitely recommend for the autumn/winter period. Book number 12 is so weird. I feel like that's such a strange way to preface this, but it is one of the weirdest books I've read recently, and that is In the House in the Dark of the Woods by Laird Hunt, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm not too sure. This is a weird folkloric fairy tale style, maybe more Grimm's fairy tales style novel that just doesn't really make sense. It's really difficult to follow. It's very, very strange. It begins with a young woman that sort of goes missing or gets lost in the woods picking berries, and she comes across lots of different characters/personas who guide her through the forest. It's very dark, it's very creepy. Nothing is ever really as it seems. We have a magical wolf cloak, a ship made of bones, a strange granny character. It just gets weirder and weirder, and I remember finishing the book and just thinking, what the hell was that? Like, what just happened? So definitely a good one if you like to be challenged, and if you really want to think about what just happened by the time you reach the end of the novel. But I mean, who doesn't love a sort of Hansel and Gretel, Red Riding Hood style Lost in the Woods story. I just think it's perfect for Halloween and autumn. Now, I promised you more witchy style stories if any of you are into that, and book number 13 is perfect if that's what you are interested in, and that's The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I read this just this year and I can tell you I really enjoyed it. It's about a small religious community that live in fear of this witch's coven in the dark woods, and they are guided by a prophet who is trying to keep them on the straight and narrow, to avoid sin, to avoid being corrupted or tempted by evil. And it follows a young girl called Emmanuel Moore, who one day is tempted into the woods, where she learns of the dark secrets and history of her deceased mother via a journal that her mother had written and taken into the woods with her. And when she's lured into the woods, the witches present to her this journal where she gradually uncovers her strange past and how she's come about and the story of her parents. It is a really gruesome and dark novel, but full of sort of witchcraft, religion, morality, evil, or good versus evil, and it really leaves you questioning what is the true evil of the story, which side is the truly evil side, or the truly evil communities. Now, congratulations if you've made it this far and you're still hanging around with me. We've got 2 more books to go, and we're definitely getting up to more modern day, as you will now see, and a little bit further away from that classic Victorian Gothic novel that I started with. And the next book is something I've actually just finished reading this week. I loved the first novel by this author, so I just had to go away and pick this one up, and that's The Devil and the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. Now, I'm very aware that he left a note at the end of this book that said he didn't want it to just be known as like a sea novel or a ship novel or nautical novel or something, and it is definitely far more than that, but it is predominantly set on a ship for, I think, pretty much the whole story, apart from maybe sandwiched either side. You have a little bit of time on land, but it follows a world famous detective called Samuel Pepys. It's kind of Sherlock-esque. He did read a lot of, I think, Agatha Christie growing up, and that's what he said is his source of inspiration for writing novels like this. So you have your detective, but it was a little bit different in that the detective isn't really the protagonist in this story. He's actually locked up, imprisoned aboard this ship for a crime that he may or may not have committed, and we actually don't find out what this crime is until we start nearing, I think, the mid to the end of the novel. And it's actually his friend, Aaron Hayes, who is trying to prove his innocence even though he does not know what the crime is. And all the while, there is a supernatural event taking place aboard this ship that he is also trying to solve in contention with this imprisonment of his detective friend Samuel Pepys. So it isn't actually the detective who is doing any of the mystery solving in any of this novel. It's Aaron instead. The story begins with a leper who is preaching sort of crazy ramblings, screaming, yelling warnings before they embark upon the ship on their sea voyage, and he's set on fire, and they soon discover that he actually doesn't have a tongue. So how is this man talking? Is he crazy? What is he really a leper? Like, these are all the questions we begin with. It's just such a strange and exciting opening to a novel, and this character actually returns throughout the book, sort of haunts the ship. So along with the dead leper, we also have strange symbols appearing, slaughtered livestock, and the rumour of a demon or devil called Old Tom that is the instigator of these evil symbols and strange deaths occurring aboard the boat. But the plot certainly thickens as the story unfolds, and we discover that every passenger on this ship is somehow connected to these supernatural occurrences and this strange devil. So I can definitely recommend this one if you're looking for a spooky Halloween read. And it's definitely slightly different to your classic haunted house style novel with it being set aboard a ship, and it's slightly different again to your Sherlock type stories where the detective is the protagonist. Instead, it's more about what we'd usually consider the minor characters of the story and how they piece together the puzzle. This is The Devil in the Dark Water, by the way. I forgot to show this when I first started talking about it, but it's a lovely cover as well. I actually got this from a charity shop for like £1 or something, and it's a relatively recent release, so If you're looking for interesting books, I can definitely recommend charity shops over buying brand new, because you're going to get a cheaper deal and it's better for the environment. And finally, book number 15, or books number 15, I could not leave out for an autumn / Halloween / winter reading list, and that's Harry Potter. This is just such a classic childhood favourite. If you're looking for something a little bit lighter, easy reading, not so much horror but still witches and wizards, then Harry Potter always has you covered. I just think autumn is the best season for sitting down, rereading this, or watching the films, getting cozied up with a blanket and a hot chocolate. You just can't go wrong with it, can you? Hello, future Emma here. I'm literally just editing this video right now, and I completely missed out a story that I originally had written down in my notebook, and then as I was typing up my notes onto Google Docs, I forgot to transfer it over. And that is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, and I had to hop on and record this little added extra bonus bit for you guys because I couldn't leave it off the list, because it is just so perfect for Halloween. It's so creepy, it's so spooky. I think Netflix did a series of it recently, but I can't watch horror films. I don't do the horror genre, I don't do spooky scary things, so I could not watch that. But I really enjoyed reading the book. I can get away with slightly scary books, and this is one that I really enjoyed. So the story starts with like a Christmas Eve gathering, and all of the guests are telling ghost stories, and then one of the guests pipes up and starts telling a story about a governess who is tasked with looking after 2 children. Now, as soon as you say children, you think Chucky, and like, you've got it right, because these kids are creepy. So the governess keeps seeing like ghosts and spooky figures. I think like a man pops up outside at one point. She goes to a lake and sees a spooky silhouette of a woman, and it seems that these characters are after, I think, the little boy, if I remember correctly, or she suspects that the ghosts are after one of the children. And the kids are constantly saying creepy things. Like, it stands out to me, the young boy said something like, "I can show you how I can be bad," or like something really weird. But it's very spooky, haunting sort of book, because kids can be terrifying. And it's just one of those really weird, eerie stories that ends in a way that you're kind of just like, what did I read? Did that really just happen? I'm gonna sleep with my light on now. So I just couldn't edit this video and not include this story. So that's it, my top autumn / Halloween reads, whatever I decide to call this video. I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope at least one of the books on this list has taken your fancy. Let me know in the comments below which one sounds most interesting, or let me know if you've read any of these and what you think of them. And I'd also be really keen to know if you're more interested in those like early Victorian sort of novels and the gothic sort of genre, or if you think you're more swayed to the more modern books that I talked about in the end of this video. Let me know. But thanks for watching, guys. Bye.